Digging Deeper Without the Coalface, the podcast that shares the incredible stories of the talented and passionate people in our industry. And it's now time for this week's episode of Digging Deeper Without the Coalface. This week's episode is brought to you by Fire Response. Fire Response is Australia's leading specialist in firefighting and emergency equipment. With unmatched expertise, a focus on quality and a commitment to customer service, Fire Response will deliver the solution you need to keep your people, assets and the environment safe. It's your host, Jessica Rouse.
Now, the Westpac Rescue Helicopter is a service we at the Coalface support as much as we possibly can. I personally haven't experienced being in a situation where I've needed the service, but I've seen and heard so many stories to know how incredibly lucky we are to have this service available when we need it right across northern New South Wales. On today's episode of Digging Deeper, we have another incredible rescue story from someone who wouldn't be here today without the service and now does anything he can to keep this helicopter in the air for anyone who needs it. David Gatwood had a serious cycling accident in 2021 in Scone. A helicopter and the first responders that day saved his life. David, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jess. This is like old times.
I know, it's been so long. Now, we've spoken a number of times about what happened in 2021, but take us back to that morning. You were going off on a cycle ride like you would any other day.
Sure. It was a Monday public holiday, the 4th of October 2021. Beautiful crisp morning in Scone, and I was riding with three others, Paul Heaton, his daughter Charlotte and Steve Wright. So our ride out to Middlebrook to the end of the Seal Road, so it's about a 38k ride out and back. And we were up against a bit of a headwind, so the thing that you love as a cyclist is with a headwind, once you've done all the hard work, when you come back, you get a nice tailwind, which pushes you along. So typically we would stop at the end of the Seal Road, have a drink, have a chat. I even took a photo of the group that morning, and so we were heading back and getting up a nice speed, and I was coming towards, and there are obviously several cattle grids along that road, and the one that's just past Crestfield Road as you're heading back into town. And we were doing probably 30 to 35 kilometres an hour, so a nice pace. And I was behind Steve Wright, so there was the four of us. We're in tandem, so I was on Steve's wheel and he was on the outside of Paul, so Charlotte was on my inside left. And hit the cattle grid and my whole world went upside down. I had absolutely no prior knowledge. I had no way of knowing or how to react. And to this day, I still don't exactly know what happened. But it went horribly wrong. I hit the cattle grid. I was catapulted over the top of my bike. My front left lobe was the first thing to hit the bitumen. Thank heavens, wearing a helmet, which absolutely saved my life first time round. And I heard the loudest bang It's always difficult.
Take your time.
And my whole world went black. And in what was probably a microsecond, I thought, this is it. I've cashed my chips in. It's goodbye, cruel world. And then I distinctly remember I'm lying on the road and I heard Charlotte's voice go, stop, because Paul and Steve had ridden into the distance. And I remember looking up at the sky and it was this cloudless, beautiful blue sky. And I thought, well, if this is heaven, this is not a bad place to be. And then all of a sudden I couldn't breathe because obviously I'd had the wind knocked out of me, and I started to panic and I was trying to get my breath. And then I was aware that obviously Paul and Steve were coming back, and I could hear Paul say, don't move, because I was still clipped into my bike and I was starting to wrestle around, and then at that same moment, this wave of pain just hit me. So A, I knew I was alive, but B, I knew I was in a world of trouble.
Yeah, something was not right.
Yeah. So Paul had the presence of mind to cradle my head and try to, comfort me and reassure me. But I was very restless, and obviously I was in a state of shock, and I was trying to come to terms with what had happened, because the dominant thought that I had just before hitting that cattle grid was, I'm doing what I love. Life's great.
Yeah.
So, I was conscious the entire time, and the guys did an awesome job. So Steve took off his cycling jersey, and Paul used that to cradle my head. He got me unclipped from the bike, and then impressed on me not to move. And obviously by that stage we were waiting for the local ambulance to arrive. The police also arrived to close off the road.
Yep.
Because I was literally right in the middle of Middlebrook Road. So, and again, I'm thankful that I wasn't on my own, and that I had, the support of my, cycling colleagues to put me in the best possible care until the professionals arrived.
Yeah, exactly. And do you remember what happened when everyone arrived, the ambulance, paramedics, the Westpac chopper? Tell me about the moment that you realised.
I distinctly remember Mel and Ben, and, Mel Jenkins probably is definitely someone I refer to as my guardian angel. Did an amazing job, just in terms of, the reassurance and getting me on a gurney. So I was lifted up onto the gurney, and then obviously, I went from the green stick to some more invasive drugs with ketamine, and that, sends you to a different place.
Yes.
The funny side of that is that I actually serenaded Mel. I sang her the first verse of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and apparently I did it word perfect because I'm a big Beatles fan. But it was a surreal experience, because obviously the drugs were taking control, because I was, in a lot of pain and didn't know the extent of the damage that had been done. And I kept saying, catch me, because I felt like I was falling off the gurney, whereas in fact I wasn't. I was, stabilised on it, but that was just one of the fears that I had, that I was constantly falling. The other thing that I vividly remember is that Mel was phoning the chopper service to get a chopper in, and they said, well, we've got multiple missions on at the moment. We're not in a position to do anything. And Mel said, you don't understand. I've never needed a chopper more than what I do right now. And somehow that service weaved its magic, and a chopper came from Tamworth, and it was there in about 15 minutes flat from that point.
Yeah.
So again, I've reflected a lot on, what was then a 20-minute chopper ride to John Hunter Hospital, as opposed to a 2-hour ride in the back of an ambulance. I dread to think what that outcome would have meant for me.
Yeah.
It's just, there were parts of it that are very vivid to me, and there are obviously, I've got gaps as well.
Yes.
So again, understanding that the first part of my body that hit the road was my skull, and I was checked for any damage to that. But I do know, and I've had obviously a lot of conversations with my wife since, is that my short-term memory is not great these days.
Yeah.
One of the things, obviously, I had 20 plus years of work in the corporate sector, and we moved to Scone in January 2015 because I took the role as the general manager with the Australian Stockhorse Society. I'd always had a career ambition to be a general manager, and that meant uprooting my family from the leafy North Shore of Sydney and bringing them to Scone where we knew absolutely nobody. But I've always prided myself on remembering people's names, and obviously it was a big part of who I was in engaging and making sure that I was developing relationships. And the amount of times today that I struggle, someone will say, "G'day, Dave," and I go, "G'day, mate," and I go, "Where do I know this person from?"
Yeah.
So I've had to come to terms with that's probably something that I'm dealing with from the accident.
Yeah. And you mentioned your lovely wife, and I realised when I was watching the video put together by the chopper last night that 2021 was when we were dealing with COVID, and she couldn't actually get in the chopper and go with you.
No, she couldn't. No, so she saw me. Obviously, I was bundled into the chopper, and obviously that's all been captured on video. And my wife was there going, "Wow," she obviously trusted. All of those emergency service people and that I was in the very best care.
Yeah.
But I found myself 8 nights in a trauma ward with no visitors.
Yeah.
So none of my family could come in. And in the end, when I was finally released, and I'll tell you, that was a battle. My wife had to go through a series of protocols to be able to gain access into the hospital and particularly into the trauma ward.
Yeah.
But I will say that I quickly learned that, if and I'm not the type of person to feel sorry for myself, but if I started to go down that route, all I had to do was look around me on that floor to know that there was a lot of people in a lot worse situation than what I was.
Yeah, yeah. And going from living in Sydney where you've got medical care,
Sure.
around the corner, around every corner, and coming to Scone where, let's face it, you just don't have anywhere near the level of care that you have in Sydney. The Westpac Rescue Helicopter Service is absolutely critical because we just don't have that level of care here in Scone or further inland to your Gunnedah, your Narrabri, etc. No,
and I already had somewhat of a connection with the helicopter service as an employee of council. There was the opportunity to provide an ongoing donation through payroll, which was something that was a kind of a no-brainer. And prior to that, a very dear friend of mine was very senior within marketing at Westpac. And part of his role was a sort of liaison point with the helicopter service.
Yeah.
And he used to tell me about his involvement and with that. And it was, one of the most enjoyable aspects of his role. So obviously, Westpac has been there since day one.
Yeah.
And an incredible organisation in terms of the support that they provide.
Yeah. And you, speaking of support, you weren't even out of hospital when you made the call to Danny Ether and said, how can I give back? How can I do everything I can to help the service that saved me?
Yeah, so again, I remember the call and Danny went, don't tell me you were the mission pickup from Middlebrook Road. I went, yep, that was me. And he said, how you doing? I went, well, look, I'm here, but I really don't know, what the future holds. I've had stabilisation surgery. So, a quick recap, I fractured my C3, C4 and C5 cervical vertebra, and I fractured my L1 in my lumbar, which was, created quite a bit of instability in my spinal column. So I had what's called stabilisation surgery, which was to insert 2 titanium rods and 6 screws, basically held me together. And they stayed in there for 13 months. So I actually had them removed in November of 2022. So that call to Danny was, look, I don't know what this outcome will lead to, but what I do know is whatever way I can, I need to give back. And 13 months later, I was appointed on the regional advisory committee for the Hunter, which is something I'm very passionate about.
Yep. So tell me about that role.
Yeah, it's a volunteer-based role with a committee, and so the committee's charter is really to provide recommendations and feedback to the Board of Management. So I am the eyes and ears, if you will, for the Upper Hunter, and identifying opportunities, working with our community partners, so be they existing or potentially new partners. Yep. Anything from, as recently as last Sunday, working with the local volunteers who do an incredible job setting up the barbecue for the Scone Literary Festival, Bush Poets breakfast.
Yep.
So again, very kindly, the Literary Festival nominated the Westpac Rescue Helicopter Service as the beneficiary of the proceeds of that morning. So, bacon and egg rolls were aplenty for, sort of 80 to 100 people who attended that, and it's always a fantastic morning. So every 2 years that happens. So again, liaising, with the organisation. Again, it's become, a very large organisation today with, I believe, over 100 employees. And I play, a very small part as a volunteer in a committee that's, again, with people that come from all walks of life. Some, similar to me, have come from the fact that, we're rescue members. So we've been a mission that's been flown, and
yep.
As many people may not realise, over 1,600 missions happen in northern New South Wales every year,
yep.
and that number is unfortunately going up. So I was one of those statistics back in 2021.
Yeah. Did you have the opportunity to go and meet the team that cared for you?
You know what? It's still on the list. There is the rescue member days that happen, and unfortunately, the last few years, I've just not been able to get there. I've had conflicting priorities, but I need to put the date in the diary this year and go to Tamworth.
Yeah, definitely. It blows me away every time I meet and speak with volunteers or people who have been rescued like yourself. The passion that they have and the emotion to want to give back to the service is just next level. I've never come across an organisation that has people that invested. Mm-hmm. It's unreal.
Yeah, and what a great realisation for me after the accident is the number of people just in Scone and surrounds that have their own story.
Yeah.
So whether that is either themselves were involved, a family member, a friend, it is just amazing.
Yeah.
And sometimes multiple people within the one family. Mm. Or some individuals have had multiple helicopter rides.
Yeah, that's it.
So it is, it's part of the fabric.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And how are you today? Where are we? 4 years on?
Well, it's three and a bit since the accident. Well, apart from having a bit of a sook.
Too harsh on yourself.
As I tend to do. Look, I'm in a great place. Look, I was telling Richard and Noel earlier that probably one of the dumbest decisions I ever made was 60 days after that accident. I was back behind the desk thinking I could conquer all as the manager for business services. So I was responsible for economic development and tourism in the Upper Hunter, and certainly physically I was struggling, but more importantly mentally I was still dealing with the trauma of the accident. So even though I had negotiated to work a compressed working week, what that meant was trying to fit a very big, busy job into less hours.
Yeah.
So it wasn't long before it bit me big time. And so I had to come to the decision that, something had to give, either, put the focus on my health and well-being or try to be Superman, which I'm clearly not. Although Charlotte did say that out of the corner of her eye, she saw me fly off my bike. So anyway, that's something I'll hang on to. So, I remember coming home one day and my wife just looked at me. She went, "What are you trying to do?
Yeah.
What are you trying to prove here? You just need to go in there and submit your resignation and focus on you." And I did, and that was the best decision that I ever made after the dumbest decision that I'd ever made. Yeah. And so, a big part of that has been a lot of work physically, but I had parked or petitioned the mental side. I went, you know what, I know I'm struggling in certain areas, but I'll get to that.
Yeah.
And that was a watch out. So I've certainly had help in that area. And that's been a big part of my recovery.
Yeah.
And certainly, from a physical aspect, what I've learned is that I listen to my body. There are certain things, I can do pretty much everything I could do before the accident. Sometimes it takes me a little bit longer.
Yeah.
I lost quite a bit of strength. Not that I was, a big he-man, don't get me wrong, but I have physical limitations, and I often think about Billy Connolly, who talked many years ago about the fact that when he bends down to pick something up, he thinks of something else he can do whilst he's there. And that's me.
Yeah.
Because it's an effort to do that.
Yeah.
So there are certain things that I struggle with. And I also say that God's got a sense of humour, because the only thing physically that I am better at, stronger at, faster at is riding my bike. So read into that what you will, because it is, apart from my voluntary work for the service, it's what I love to do.
Yeah.
And, most people have been really supportive with that, to say I totally get it, because, we live in the horse capital of Australia, and the old adage is if you fall off a horse, you get back on it.
That's
Well,
right.
for me, it was always a case of by hook or by crook, I'm getting back on my bike.
Yeah.
And I've done that with a vengeance.
Yeah. That's your happy place.
It's my happy place.
Always will be.
It absolutely is. From a physical point of view, in terms of well-being, but as importantly, the mental benefits that I receive from doing that, and being a part of, what is a fantastic group of cyclists that I enjoy. So enjoy the social side of that. We banter. There are the coffee catch-ups, the stories that we tell. It's what we love to do.
Yeah, exactly. How long was it after your accident that you got back on?
You know what? I was trying to think of the exact number of days, but I bought a gravel bike, so I'm a road cyclist, so I'm a mammal, a middle-aged man in lycra, and road cycling. Clearly in a rural area, you need to be aware of potholes and the shoulders of roads and cattle grids for that matter. But I purchased whilst I was going through my recovery, I purchased a gravel bike, which is a little bit more relaxed in its geometry. It has the bigger tyres. So that used to sit in our bedroom, and it was the last thing that I would look at before I would go to bed, and the first thing that I would see when I get up in the morning.
Yeah.
So I think it was about 100 days. Thereabouts. It was sometime in January, and I remember I went out for a ride. It was a Saturday morning, and there were three or four. Steve Wright, who was with me that fateful day, came out with his wife Jo, and another local couple here. And look, it was a struggle to just develop the confidence to go, you know what, I've got to get out there at some stage. So, but when I came to a cattle grid, I stopped, I got off the bike, and I took the bike along. And it took me a little while to, just gain the confidence to be able to cross the cattle grids again. But I think that was 3 bikes ago now.
Yeah.
So, and my dear wife says to me, so which one's going to go when you buy your new one? You just don't understand. You don't You don't give your bikes away. You collect them. They all mean something. So that was my foray back into cycling, and then today I ride a beautiful. It's an aero road bike, which I absolutely love.
Yeah. Lastly, if there was one thing you could say to everyone on that day back in 2021.
Oh. Now you're going to bring me undone. And I think I may have touched on this in the video, is that, if you've ever... Look, there are so many amazing charities out there all vying for the same dollar, right? And clearly we're going through tough economic times, but if you've ever thought of pledging, making a donation, doing something through workplace giving, just do it, because you absolutely never know. Yeah. A loved one could be the beneficiary of that generosity.
Exactly. David, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you, Jess. Look, as hard as it is, it's cathartic as well. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Digging Deeper with At The Coalface. You can download more episodes of the podcast on all your favourite podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, also on YouTube, Amazon Music, all the usual places. Make sure you leave us a rating and a review. We'd love to hear what you thought. And if you do have a story idea or something you'd like us to talk about on the podcast, please send me an email, jess@thecoalface.net.au. I'd love to hear from you, and we'll be back next time for another episode of Digging Deeper with At The Coalface.